The Sonic franchise has changed wildly over the last year, hasn't it? Last time I could only imagine what the next game would be like, and look at us now. Sonic 2 came out to be a blockbuster, Origins finally came out, it kinda sucked, but it did come out, and we got a new Netflix show, which I still haven't watched yet, but it seems to be pretty popular, even having a new season on the way. And finally, we actually got a new installment, being Sonic Frontiers, and it turned out to be really good. 2022 was a really wild year for me, so I really apologize about the absence. Last time, I covered the original Sonic the Hedgehog, and while it's not the best 2D Sonic game today, you know, Marble Zone, Labyrinth Zone, the impact it had on the industry is undeniable. To quickly recap, Sonic the Hedgehog was the best-selling game of 1991, and by the end of its life sold over 14 million copies. It was clear that Sonic was the major success Sega was hoping for, so obviously the next step would be a sequel, right? Yeah, it's time to talk about some history again. However, unlike last time, I won't be going as in-depth this time around. Mostly because I feel like the history of Sonic was very important to talk about. But I will be mentioning a lot of the most important details, so don't worry about that. And exactly like last time, I have chapters and description just for those who want to skip to the review, which frankly, I don't really blame you. I'm super excited to dig into Sonic 2, but for now, let's go back to the past and review some history. The story picks up right after Sonic 1's release. Despite Sonic 1 being a tremendous success, the development of a sequel is rather troubled. For one, Yuji Naka left Sega over some disagreements about company policies. Yep, one of the founding fathers of Sonic left Sega. Really mind-blowing. Meanwhile, back in the United States, Mark Cerny had been hired by Sega to create STI, Sega Technical Institute, a game development division of Sega based in America, likely because of the growing success of Sega as a brand in the United States. After the development of the first game, Hirokazu Yasuhiro was set to come to the United States to join STI. When Mark Cerny learned that Naka left Sega, he quickly called him up and convinced him to join STI, promising him a higher salary and more executive power. Naka, liking this idea, was set to go to the United States. With most of the big figures behind Sonic being present, the biggest exception being Naoto Oshima, who never actually left Sega and later directed Sonic CD, it was obvious that the team would start work on the sequel to the hit game. However, Sega was very hesitant to give the green light, weirdly enough. They thought it was too soon for a new Sonic, but it didn't take Sega too long to realize that Sonic was literally printing Sega money.
Here comes the money!
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money!
So they greenlit the production of its sequel in November of 1991. This meant that the team only had 9 months to develop Sonic 2, which, man, I'm getting ahead of myself here by saying this, but imagine making a great game like Sonic 2 in only 9 months. Insane, but hey, let's get back to the history. One of the first ideas the team wanted for the game was a new character, one that could also be a main character alongside Sonic, and much like the first game, another internal contest was held by Sonic Team to decide the character that would join Sonic on his next adventure. I can't find the exact number of entries, but I would at least like to show one by artist Great Stith for a flying turtle character named Boomer? You guys might not give a single shit, but fun fact about me. I adore turtles. My favorite animal without a single doubt. I even have 2 pet turtles. Their names are Squirtle and Little. Say hi, Squirtle and Little. Okay, but anyway, although I kinda wish we had a turtle character, this drawing tells me that Boomer would have been a huge pace breaker, judging that he's taking Sonic over a large bed of spikes, which would have meant stopping mid-level to ride on Boomer. Pretty happy this never made it past the drawing board, but ultimately the winner was Yasushi Yamaguchi, who designed a Teal Fox. Yamaguchi wanted the name of the character to be Miles Per Hour, being a pun of miles per hour, as everyone knows, but the rest of the team wanted his name to be Tails, matching Sonic's simplistic name. So, funnily enough, they decided to sneak in Miles Per Hour into the concept art, making both his legitimate name, Miles being his actual name, and Tails being his nickname. And just like that, Sonic's most popular number 2 was created, Tails. Not my favorite Sonic character, but I still love Tails. He proved himself to me in the later games. But getting back on track, during development, Sonic 2 was a very ambitious game, originally planning to feature over 18 different zones, and even a time travel concept was talked about in early development, which really fascinates me, but it was scrapped. It would have been difficult to do everything the team wanted within the 9 months of development time. One of the biggest struggles during the development was the cultural differences between the team. The American half were always used to the 9-to-5 mindset, while the Japanese half worked most hours of the night, fixing all the errors that the entire team glanced over. As time went on, the hype for Sonic 2 was really starting to build up within the team. Everyone was extremely passionate about making the game as good as it could be, and Sega wanted to advertise the game as much as possible, so they made a deal with Nickelodeon to show off the game, specifically an early Emerald Hill Zone on the show Nick Arcade, which that beta leaked on the internet sometime in 2006. And sometime after the Nick Arcade prototype, another build was shown off at the New York Toy Show. Fun fact, the cartridge for this build was actually stolen. Yeah, imagine that. That's something that could never happen in today's world. And that's just how big the hype for Sonic 2 was. Known as the Simon Y prototype, it was named after the dude who found the ROM back in 1999, and was the source for most of the beta content over the years. Now, like last time, I won't be going too deep into the beta. However, I do have a lot to say about a few of these scrap stages, starting with, of course, Hidden Palace, the most well-known scrap Sonic 2 level. The thing that interests me the most is the Badnik designs. They look really cool, but due to the game's pace and deadlines, the team was forced to scrap the zone. However, you can still listen to the stage's track in the game's sound test. Interesting. I know Hidden Palace is the most well known, but my favorite scrap stage is Wood Zone. This level has almost nothing to it, but it just looks so wildly different from any other Mega Drive Sonic zone. I do think Mystic Cave is the better forest theme zone by a long shot and was the better choice, but man, I would love to see this concept get reused someday. And here are some scrap staged concepts. I'm a really big fan of some of these pieces, and it shows the ambition that the game owns. Ocean Wind Zone and Emerald Isle Zone are my favorites for sure. I love any water/ocean aesthetics in video games. Emerald Isle is so cool to me because it's actually an area in the state that I live in, and I always thought the name of it was very Sonic-esque.
Sonic 2 is here with 10 levels and a fresh new half-pipe. A casino zone, his new buddy Tails, and blast processing, which makes him faster than ever. With awesome new graphics, the new split screen lets 2 play.
Just like that, on November 21st, 1992, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was released and the world was never the same. The game was released in the United States and Europe simultaneously, on a day known as Sonic Tuesday, a very genius marketing campaign. This was also around the time the whole blast processing thing was being thrown around in commercials.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't. So what's blast processing do?
In other words, it's just showing off the speedy gameplay of Sonic. The one thing that the Mega Drive had over the SNES was the fact that it was slightly faster, so Sega used that in commercials, mostly as a coping mechanism, while in Japan, they mostly just advertised Tails. And there we have it. Again, I did skim over some of the little details, but for the most part, I covered everything that's major during the Sonic 2 development cycle. Now, for the moment you have all been waiting for, let's review Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Genesis. Like last time, I'm going to be playing this game on the original Genesis. I know a lot of you are going to ask why I don't play this game on emulation to get quote-unquote better looking footage, and I answered this in my revisit to Sonic the Hedgehog, so I'll keep it brief here. I personally like to have the original experience when playing a game. I'm huge into retro gaming, and thus, I like to keep things authentic. I'm not against emulation. In fact, I think it's the morally right way to play Nintendo games, especially Switch games. I'm just saying, something like this to me looks very unnatural. My reasoning being stupid or not, this is how I like to play my games. Not to mention, it's just cool to play this game on a CRT, like when it originally came out. The game starts up with Sonic running past the screen, forming the Sega logo, and I just love this title screen. It's just good, nothing less than iconic. The addition of Tails on the ring is just great. And look at Sonic! God, he's so cool. Okay, I'll stop. Before we get into the gameplay, let's talk about the story, because there's actually more than you might think. After putting an end to the Doctor's plans time and time again, Sonic decides he needs to travel the world to seek more adventure. And since he can't travel over big bodies of water, Sonic uses the Tornado, his plane, to fly into the unknown. After stumbling upon an island with the name Westside Island, Sonic decides to explore the land. Sonic is also completely unaware of the legend connected to the island and its similarities it shares with South Island. 7 stones are used to give peace to the people of Westside Island. This peace could have been everlasting if it weren't for other people and their desires to use the stones for their own selfish gains, which the gods took the stones and hid them throughout the island. Over time, Sonic realized that someone was following him. Meet Miles Per Hour, a young fox with 2 tails. Being that this is abnormal, Miles was bullied by his peers, even getting a nickname that would overtake his actual name, Tails. When Tails first discovers Sonic running around, his entire way of thinking changed. He wanted to be cool and follow in the footsteps of his hero, and I mean, who can blame him? As time went on, Sonic accepted Tails and both explored the island together. While traveling on his own, Tails discovers the Tornado sitting on a beach. Being a huge nerd, Tails got excited and went over to check it out. It didn't take long for Tails to discover whose plane it was. I mean, Sonic's name is literally on it, but no, it was Sonic sleeping under one of the Tornado's wings that gave Tails a pretty good idea on who owned it. Suddenly, in the distance, an explosion went off, waking Sonic from his sleep. As Sonic and Tails looked off in the distance, Sonic spotted a familiar robot army. Sonic, knowing who was behind this, ran off to stop the Doctor's plans, cursing his name. The Doctor followed Sonic to Westside Island, and with that, he learned about the island's legend, and Eggman knew that the legend was indeed the Chaos Emeralds. Now, not only learning that Westside Island was the true home of the Emeralds, but now knowing there is also a 7th, Eggman wants to use the Emeralds to power his newest creation, the Death Egg, to rule over the entire world. The story this time is definitely more involved than the first game, but I'm sure this is the first time that most of you are even hearing this. Well, that's because the plots are basically totally different in the US. In fact, this is a good time as any to bring up something that has always bothered me in the Sonic community. The classic games weren't just about silly old Robotnik kidnapping animals, like, at all. Yeah, sure, that was a part of it, but he used the animals to power his machines, nothing more. That's why when I hear things like, "What happened to Eggman kidnapping animals?" whenever someone talks about the newer games, it really angers me. Like, do the fans not even know what their favorite games are about? The localization Sonic is not the Sonic you know. The Western media like Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and other concepts are what made people think this way, and I think it's absurd that it still goes on to this day. People don't call Princess Peach Toadstool anymore. So what makes Sonic any different? Why is that the people just ignore the source material and go on with their headcanon? I don't know, but it really bothers me. But hey, that's another topic for another day. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is built off the first game, and thus we get nothing but pure quality of life improvements. For example, the spike glitch has been totally fixed. And while there is a speed cap technically, it was adjusted so Sonic can still get a tremendous amount of speed. So much so I didn't actually know there was a speed cap until about a few years ago. You will never notice the speed cap. This game can get so fast by just running down a hill, rolling to a ball, or by going through the new to this game, speed boosters. And apparently this made the community split into 2, but honestly I can't find any evidence actually supporting this claim, other than mid-2010s nonsense videos.
I think we're at the point where we need to admit that this was never really a great franchise. Nope. And that
What the hell?
I think
this was just mostly some post-06 BS.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
However, I would be lying if I told you this was the biggest addition to Sonic 2, because Sonic 2 was the first game to introduce the Spin Dash. Yes, imagine being the thing that introduces something as raw as the Spin Dash. Now, I have to explain what it is, but I shouldn't have to. Anyone that knows what Sonic is knows about the Spin Dash. It's Sonic's most iconic ability, other than his super speed of course. The Spin Dash will give Sonic an instant burst of speed. All you have to do is hold down and mash A to rev it up. Let go and Sonic will zoom across the screen.
What? You don't even earn the speed anymore? What even is this series? Gosh, what even is a Sonic game anymore?
Dude, shut the fuck up! The Spin Dash is awesome because it's not a handicap or a win level ticket. It's a tool. Want to get to a faraway platform? Well, rep up a Spin Dash and jump at the right time. Need some extra speed but don't want to walk all the way back just to build up enough? Stop, Spin Dash, and get a move on. It cannot be overstated how amazing the Spin Dash is as a gameplay mechanic. It had such a big impact that it made Sonic 1 instantly unplayable for some people. It would be so popular that it would become a mainstay in Sonic's moveset, and almost every game since has it in some form. And the fact is that these levels weren't actually designed for the spin dash, and it feels this good to use. The spin dash was actually a later addition to the game, so it's just so weird how it works so well. While we are on the topic of Sonic in general, his sprite got altered slightly, now being a different shade of blue, and I much prefer this over the blue in Sonic 1. It looks way more vibrant to me. Not to mention he has some new animations, mostly being new tripping animations, and Sonic's new waiting animation, and man, I love this so much. It had so much charm to a character who was already bursting with stuff. And since we have a new character, being Tails, he's playable too. What are his differences? He doesn't have any, actually. Tails is known for his flight, but in Sonic 2, we were actually not allowed to use that ability, which is strange. I have memories of doing this on the Genesis when I was a kid. I guess that was just some Mandela effect or something. But that's not really an issue. Tails is more well known for following Sonic around in the game, or at least trying to follow Sonic around. The Tails AI is so bad, but it's pretty funny to watch. But honestly, I always turn Tails off, and I just play as Sonic only. Why would I do something like that? Well... naturally, the axe system from the first game returns, with some improvements. Instead of 3 acts, there are now 2. First act ending with the signpost, and the second ending with the boss. Some may ask if taking away an act means the game is shorter. I can say that this is not the case. Both acts are longer than the acts in Sonic 1 by a long shot, and the boss being the end of the second act versus having a third just for the boss makes sense to me. And the series will continue to use this for the 2D games, except Sonic 4 for some fucking reason. But anyway, another change to the acts is the way special stages work. Instead of keeping 50 rings until the end of the stage, you have to have 50 rings when you go through a checkpoint. These checkpoints, like the first game, are spread throughout the level, meaning you can actually do this more than once. If you're good enough, some people can get all of them by chemical plant. I greatly prefer this structure. It allows you to collect the emeralds at your own pace, instead of having to do them after every stage in the first game. Since we're on the topic of the special stage, it's time I talk about those two, because they are... the half pipe. These special stages are laid out in a half-pipe structure, and before I go on, I just want to say that these are infinitely better than the ones in Sonic 1, by default. These special stages are not bad. Honestly, the half-pipe hate is so real, and I will admit, I'm a part of it, but I don't think that it's just bad, just overused. But in the context of this game, it was a new concept. I just think that it kept getting reused because Sonic 2 is Sonic 2, but ignoring everything else, these are okay. I can and will say that these to a new-time player will enrage you. It sometimes requires split-second reaction time, and during a time where I was practicing these stages, it made me want to rip my hair out. And this is exactly why I play as a Sonic alone, because oh my gosh, Tails will ruin everything for you! Remember what I said when I played as Sonic alone? This is why! I remember first trying to do this with Sonic and Tails and my reaction was... no! This could have been solved so easily by Tails not being able to take damage, but of course, that was not the option. When you're playing as Sonic alone, these can be really rewarding if you do it right. But I'll admit, this is probably because I'm very experienced at this game, and I can see the bullshit coming. It's muscle memory at this point. But I do get a kick out of Special Stage 7. The part where you jump from side to side to collect a trail of rings, it's just really neat. But no, the actual reason one would want to collect the emeralds is the reward. If you remember last time how if you got the emerald, you just got a slightly different ending? Well, they decided to change that by making one of the coolest and rawest designs in all of fiction. Supersonic. What more should I say? This is one of the rawest things I've ever seen in my entire fucking goddamn life. Look at the sprite! Look how cool he is when he gets in position when you press down. He's so ready. He's not even phased when he's on a ledge. What a total badass. He never gets bored either. He is not playing around. And the fact he flies instead of runs, oh, this is so cool. I can stare at this sprite for hours. The developers decided that it was a good idea to give a new gameplay option to players who would get all the emeralds, especially since you can get them all in the first zone. Supersonic is a transformation for Sonic the Hedgehog. When Sonic transforms, gosh, just saying that is so cool. Sonic is granted invincibility. It has an even greater speed. The design of Supersonic himself may look familiar to the two people out there who don't know the origin. Super Sonic was almost unapologetically inspired off of Super Saiyan, so much so that this concept art for Super Sonic was literally the same angle and expression as the panel for when Goku originally transformed. Straight down to the abilities too. Super Saiyan multiplies the strength and speed of its user, same as Super Sonic. The funny part is, this was way before Dragon Ball kicked off in the West. So many people were unaware of this connection. This would not be the end of Dragon Ball inspiration for the franchise, however, the larger examples being Shadow being basically Sonic's Vegeta, Silver being a lame version of Future Trunks, and most recently, Sonic Frontier's boss battles basically being Dragon Ball fights. Even Sonic as a character has so many parallels to Goku. Some people may have mixed opinions about this, but how do I personally feel about it? Maybe I'm biased, but I don't care. I cannot put it into words how much I love this. Dragon Ball is my second biggest obsession, next to Sonic of course, so having my two favorite franchises ever being just inherently connected, it's so cool, and I can talk about it for hours. Now, just a PSA, please make a Sonic SH figure art, please! Back to Super Sonic as a game mechanic, you can really feel the added speed. It can almost be hard to control at times. I had a pretty hard time in Oil Ocean Act 2. Blasting through a stage and destroying everything in your sight more than makes up for slippery control. You can beat the stage in record time using Super. On top of him literally being one of the coolest things I've ever seen, Super Sonic is honestly one of the best rewards in any video game. I remember the first time I got on my own. I felt like a boss plowing through the game afterwards. It's such a good reward for getting all the emeralds. You can get the best ending in the game for it. I mean, look at this pose. Jesus Christ, he's so cool. This is it. This is so raw that it's still the fucking cow. Originally, I was going to talk about the level's bosses on their own, zone by zone, but as I went on, I noticed that I was saying a lot of the same things, so I'm just going to cover them here. At the end of every second act are the bosses, most of them being super easy. It's just a matter of learning the pattern. One of my favorites includes Aquatic Ruins boss, where you can jump on the totems and attack Eggman. I always thought this was fun to do. But since we got that out of the way, I think it's about time to cover the zones themselves, because I have a lot to say about each of these this time around. Now rocking 11, the first is Emerald Hill Zone. Such a great first level. It uses the same colors and general aesthetics of Green Hill, but yet manages to feel completely different. In the last video I said in the zones you can take multiple pathways throughout the level. Well, in my opinion, this is the first true start of that. You can take the lower level, usually with more spikes and other dangerous hazards, or the upper path, which is slightly tricky to reach, but when you do, you're rewarded with goodies and overall a much smoother time. I also think this level is really good at letting the player play around and get used to the new changes. Overall, the zone is such a joy to be in, and one of the best opening levels in any Sonic game. I always personally really like these twirling loops that make Sonic look kinda 3D. I know, I'm very easy to please. Chemical Plant Zone. The most iconic zone of this game. This stage is not only a fantastic second level, but it adds in a level gimmick without sacrificing the sense of speed. The thing I love about this stage the most is how unique it is. The total whiplash this level gives is intense. Coming from a beautiful land such as Emerald Hill to this depressing chemical plant with no nature in sight. As said before, this is the first stage that introduced the speed boosters, and they are used right in this level. Instead of being in every part of the entire level, they are used to grant the player a sudden boost of speed, and it's up to them to keep it going versus like 15 of them in the exact same row, removing any challenge from keeping to your momentum. The speed you can achieve in this level is exhilarating. The design of this zone is definitely one of Sonic 2's best. There are so many different paths that some players can go years without discovering them, and that's great design. Contradicting that though is the elephant in the room, the infamous part of Chemical Plant Act 2. For years, players feared this part of the level, and honestly, it's just basic platforming. If people that are not kids still struggle with this, I don't know what to tell you. Go play Kirby or something. But as a kid, man, the anxiety of it alone scared me. I think what makes this part so scary is the fact that you know that the drowning music will start to play, so it's easier for you to slip up. Sonic's physics are different underwater after all, not to mention as a kid I got crushed a lot, but that's just a larger issue of the classic games. But even as a kid I never had that much of an issue with it, maybe cause of death every now and then, but definitely an overblown issue. Aquatic Ruin Zone, my absolute favorite level in Sonic 2. Man, where do I begin? I adore the theme of this stage. An old lake with forgotten ruins. It makes for a gorgeous looking stage. And that's not to mention the plants that cover some of the foreground. Oh, the music. I love this track. It's my favorite in the entire game. I can't get enough of it. But my favorite thing about this level? The gimmick. You see, Aquatic Ruin is a water level by choice. The zone has two main paths. The underwater part, and the top portion, which acts as a normal level, without even having to touch the water. This goes back to what I was saying about how the design of this game is brilliant. You don't even have to touch the water if you don't want to. Just be a little careful while platforming. You can enjoy all the amazing aesthetical perks of a water level, but without any of the BS, which, for someone whose favorite level aesthetics are water levels, this seriously rocks. Aquatic Ruin gives you options, and that is something that all games should have. And that's not to say the water part of the stage is bad. Far from it. I believe that it's really well made, and designed with Sonic Water's slower movements in mind, unlike Labyrinth Zone, but no, seriously, there's not one part of this level I dislike, but I always go for the top portion of the stage. Man, I legit love this stage so much. I hate to be that guy, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone share this sentiment. I know it's a meme for Sonic fans to go, "Am I the only one that likes this game? Huh? But I'm being serious. In all my years of talking to fellow Sonic fans, everyone just kind of agrees that this level is just only okay, and I can't disagree more. You always hear people talking about Chemical Plant or Mystic Caves, but never Aquatic Ruin, and I think that is absurd. Where are my fans at? Where are the Aquatic Ruiners at? To me, this stage has such a strong identity. It did everything it set out to do, and delivers on it in my opinion. It has the most brilliant level design of Sonic 2 in general. Combining two levels in one was basically unheard of, and I think it's criminally underrated. I hope this sparks some interest in you guys out there, because, man, I want to see this level get the love it deserves. And apparently during the development of the stage, it was called Neo Green Hill. And honestly, I thank God or whoever is up there every day that this didn't happen. Branding it as a Green Hill variant would have killed any identity of the stage. Oh, and if the name sounds familiar to you guys, it was the name of Sonic Advance's first stage. Casino Night Zone. Another very iconic level, second only to Chemical Plant. Right off the bat, some may say that the colors in this stage are way too distracting. And my answer to that is, it's a casino! Of course it's gonna be distracting. I absolutely adore the colors of this stage. It all looks so pretty. The neon palm trees, the flowers, the signs that say Sonic and Miles. I love these little faces of Sonic and Tails around the stage. The zone taking place at night really makes these colors stand out. Classic Sonic is all about wicked cool colors and cool vibes, so I personally love it. But what about the gameplay? Well, the gimmick of the stage is that it acts like a pinball game. You will be bouncing around everywhere. And while I can't deny for a single minute that this is a perfect fit for not only a Sonic game, but this level too, it can be sometimes really annoying to get past. But it's nothing to make a really big note of. I actually find a lot about the stage to be really fun, like these little things that change colors every time you bounce on them. Once it turns red and you bounce on it again, it will disappear. Half of my time in the stage is just bouncing off of each of them one by one. Oh my gosh, the slot machines. These were the reason why I found out time overs were a thing. This is one of my most fond memories of Sonic 2. One late night, I was around 7 or 8, I discovered that I can easily grind lives off the slot machine, so I did. I just kept going. But sooner or later I felt a giant spike of fear when Sonic randomly died. I had no clue why until the time over music started to play. Ugh, I don't know, man. Hearing the music right after a sudden fear really unsettled me as a kid. And I know, nowadays it's more like... But as a young kid who used to read creepypastas all the time, it really freaked me the fuck out. Hilltop Zone. Before anything, I have to say for me, this is the most unmemorable zone in the entire game. I'm not saying it's bad, quite the opposite actually, it's just the theme is kind of boring to me, which does make sense within the context of the game, because in Emerald Hill, Hilltop is actually visible, and literally as I'm writing this, I just discovered the name may be a pun, because Emerald Hill, Hilltop. But anyway, all I'm saying is, different graphics would have been nice. This level's main gimmick is that it takes place on a volcano, which you can actually go inside of, but this does mean it has some segments that remind me of... Yeah, but that's an insult because this is nothing like Marble Zone. Here, this obstacle is handled really well. For example, in Act 2 the lava rises up and you have to escape it, so it never really breaks the game's pace. Some may say the cable cars makes things slow, but you can just spin dash off of them and move on. And come to think of it, this stage reminds me a lot of Sonic 1. not just because of the lava. These seesaws are similar to the ones in Starlight Zone, but as stated before, the thing Sonic 2 nails is introducing actual gimmicks without having to sacrifice the speed. In all, Hilltop is a really good stage, but in my opinion, it's one of the lesser stages. Actually, I used to forget this stage was even a thing sometimes. Mystic Cave Zone. My second favorite level in Sonic 2, the Lost Woods with a lot of twists and turns, secret pathways hidden by vines, and a ton of traps to catch whoever attempts to enter. I love its use of purple and green, and let's not forget that music. It's so good. The stage obstacles are things like spike balls, moving block, and moss-covered rocks that can crush you if you end up under it. You know, like actual traps. Again, this is so cool. This gives a lot of challenge without it being punishing, which is something a lot of earlier 4th gen games can't say. If I die, I know it's my fault, not the game being overly punishing for the sake of padding out game time. I love this part where you can change the invincibility monitors, the vines you can grab on top of the level to reveal new pathway. It all feels so right. It's like I'm actually trying to find my way out of a real woods, and then suddenly I fall into a bed of spikes with no way out. Okay, yeah, it's time to talk about that part. In Act 2, there's a vine that can open up a new path. Sounds fine, right? Well, if you miss the vine, you fall into a pit of spikes with no way out. I have to be honest, I love this in a way. Not only does it fit with the context of the stage, but it's just funny. I can imagine the devs giggling while they were designing the zone. Even if you were on Sonic's super form, you can't escape. You have to sit there and wait for your rings to deplete. This part is responsible for so many deaths, including a lot of mine. I love this because it's such a shock and comes out of nowhere, and it sticks with you. I know I can never forget the first time I fell in. I couldn't process it. I had no idea what to think of it. Now, I feel like I have to bring it up here. The mobile remaster / origins port of this game completely removes this. Instead, it leaves it to something else entirely, which we will get into when it's time to talk about that version of the game. Oil Ocean Zone. The nature versus technology theme here was nearly perfected. This is a sea of oil dumped by the Doctor himself. There's no signs of life other than the animals you free. Going along with the polluted ocean theme, the badniks are based around sea creatures, like octopi and seahorses, which is really clever. Alright, so my question here is, what the hell happens to the animals? I mean, sure, Sonic sets them free, but where do they go? Do they just fall in the oil? I actually really want to know the answer to this. Eggman is a goddamn psycho. Now, if I'm being honest, this is one of my lesser favorite stages to go through in Sonic 2, but as I said in Hilltop, that's not saying the stage sucks or anything. Sonic 2 shines by the fact it does such an amazing job at even making the most lackluster zones at least fun to go through. There's not one level I actively dread. Metropolis Zone. One of Eggman's bases, and similar to Scrap Brain Zone, there are plenty of badniks and traps to stop Sonic. Metropolis is infamous for being very punishing, and I have to agree. The enemy placement in here sucks. You will get hit by them, no matter what. Time to whip out my gavel because this is bad game design to a T. Newcomers will not have a good time playing this stage at all. Each one of these bastards are really annoying. Slicers. As I said before, no matter how good you are, there will be times you will get hit by them no matter what. They shoot their hooks at you, and the movement makes it really hard to avoid, especially in tight spaces. Shellcrackers. Like Slicers, they are often found in areas where movement is limited, so good luck trying not to get hit. Last but certainly not least, the Astron. These dudes are probably the worst. When you run on the screws, they will trigger and launch their spikes. This is fucking annoying. You either have to hope for the best and make a run for it, or you just have to stop and avoid them. Both of those options risk you falling off the screw, meaning you have to walk all the way across the screen with the hope that the screw will spawn back in the starting place. Another element most hate about this level is the fact that it actually loops from top to bottom, and honestly, that's not really that bad. This ain't Zelda, it's a platformer. Now, I have to admit, I get a lot of enjoyment out of this zone. I think it does a great job at that Sonic 2 design philosophy. For example, these screws. Sure, it may seem like you're just standing around in one place, but the means of progression is still using Sonic's abilities. It's really cool. Sonic turning a huge screw by running up it, I think these little details are very much overlooked. I also believe that the challenge in the zone is very satisfying, and just to be clear, I am not talking about the badniks. I can't and won't downplay that. That is true bad design. It's actually the stage's obstacles that I love. For example, these blocks that have a spear coming out of all sides. There's always a chance you could get hit when jumping on it. Your timing has to be good in order to pass it, and I find it really rewarding. The average player might dread coming here, and I really can't blame them, but veterans and obsessive players won't have much trouble with it. I will just throw it out there that this was the first classic Sonic game I could beat by myself at age 8, so if I can do it, so can you. Sky Chase Zone. After his defeat in Metropolis Zone, Eggman makes his escape to the sky. This is the first and only auto-scrolling level on the entire Mega Quadology. Instead of platforming, you move on the plane back and forth and destroy the badniks as they come. A lot of people argue that this level is a pace breaker because of its slower gameplay, but I actually strongly disagree with this. Something like Marble Zone was a total pace breaker because of it coming directly after the first stage, Green Hill. But Sky Chase, this is the 9th zone. Coming after something like Metropolis automatically makes the change of pace feel more refreshing, or rewarding depending how you look at it. Compared to Metropolis, it's one of the easiest stages in the entire game. The only thing that may be considered hard is if you aren't careful, you could spin dash off the tornado. But after that, jumping forward or wherever will actually have the tornado follow you, so you have nothing to worry about. The funny thing is about this stage, it shouldn't be relaxing at all. Within the context of the story, Sonic and Tails are supposed to be in hot pursuit over Eggman, but the stage is just so relaxing. The music is nothing short of amazing. I even love the badniks. Nebula is just funny looking. Valkyries are just so easy to destroy that it's hilarious. And my absolute favorite badnik, the Turtleoids. Wait a minute.
Holy shit!
Jokes aside, as a kid and even now, I'm a huge kaiju fan, Gamera being one of my absolute favorites as a turtle-obsessed kid. So any sort of reference to him in any media always got me freaking out. And the funny part is you defeat him by killing the little one on top. So, what the hell happens to the animal friends when Sonic defeats a badnik? I mean, yeah, they are set free, but they literally just fall. There's nothing to catch them. Nothing like a little parachute or anything, they just straight up fucking fall to their death. What the fuck? Ever since I was a kid, I thought about this. I always felt so bad for them. Overall, I love this zone. Yeah, some may think of it as boring, but I see it as a great change of pace, especially after dealing with the gauntlet known as Metropolis Zone. Not to mention, this stage is actually a single act, because it leads directly into Wing Fortress Zone, basically Sky Chase Act 2. This stage, while short, rocks. It really feels like you're infiltrating a fortress. I don't think I've ever properly completed this stage. I always take the shortcut. The boss, the egg barrier, is actually pretty challenging to a newcomer. I remember struggling with this guy a lot during my time as a kid, but it's over before you know it. After defeating the egg barrier, Sonic and Tails chase after Eggman, shooting down the tornado in the process. Sonic catches onto the Eggman spaceship and successfully gets to Death Egg Zone. This zone gives off a "this is it, no going back" feeling. The Death Egg is Eggman's orbital fortress, an entire space station, also hosting Eggman's most dangerous machines. It's even designed after Eggman's head, which is honestly really funny. I love how egotistical Eggman is, putting his face on almost all of his inventions. But Death Egg Zone isn't so much of a level than it is a pathway to get to the two final bosses of the game. First up, Mecha Sonic. Mecha Sonic looks so raw. I mean, just look at him. That's cool as shit. You are a stupid liar that probably smells if you disagree. This would be the part where I complain about the fact Mecha Sonic has no merch, but the absolute chads over at Jakks Pacific made this badass Mecha Sonic figure. Jakks, you will forever hold my respect and go down as one of the best Sonic toy companies if you continue with this role. Now make Mecha Sonic from Sonic 3, I beg of you, please! Okay, anyway, so this zone's boss may seem hard at first, but let the Sonic 2 champion show it how it's done. When Mecha Sonic floats down, start spin dashing immediately as he lands to get as many hits on him as possible. Stop once he starts to curl up in a ball. Now, wait for him to land so you can start attacking him on his head. Just aim to where you're not making contact with the spikes. If you follow that, you should go down in no time at all. It's actually funny to mention, while I was recording for this video, I actually broke the game by going too fast. I defeated Mecha Sonic and I just got soft locked. Mecha Sonic was just the warm-up, however. Eggman has one last resort, the Death Egg Robot. Holy cow, what a step up from the final boss in Sonic 1. It feels like there are actual stakes here. The music is intimidating. The design of the Death Egg itself really looks cool to me. When I was a kid, I dreamt about having a huge figure of this guy for my Sonic to fight. And again, the literal Giga Chad that Jakks made a playset. I would have gone insane for this as a kid. But anyway, being a final boss, it takes longer to beat. It has about 12 hits. And it's actually really easy to get yourself killed. So reckless players, such as myself, will die a lot. I was always in a rush to beat the guy and end up dying a whole bunch. But when you beat it, it feels good. I will never forget the pure feeling of relief I felt when beating this boss as a kid. I was never able to beat a classic Sonic game as a kid. I never felt good enough for those games. But after beating Sonic 2 for the first time, I felt good. And since then, I've replayed the Mecha Quadrology games very often. After Sonic defeats Eggman, the entire Death Egg catches on fire. Sonic makes his escape in his super form, meeting up with Tails, who went to see if Sonic needed to be rescued. And with that, the story of Sonic 2 ends. Now, I can talk about the two endings. 9 out of 10 people prefer the bad ending, where Tails actually rescues Sonic because Sonic falls from space, versus the good ending where Sonic uses his transformation to escape, and Tails, he's just kinda there. They argue that the bad ending is more emotional because of the cutscene where Tails realizes he needed to join the fight. And while I can see where they're coming from, I personally like the good ending more. I mean, guys, it doesn't change the fact that Tails is still there, he shows up. It's not like he decided not to come, and I think it's just as impactful. Tails, thinking that his friend was in trouble, jumps into his plane only to realize that his friend is okay. It's just as emotional. And, it might have something to do with this ending shot looking really freaking cool. Look at that pose, it's just fucking awesome. Sonic 2 is the perfect sequel. It takes what Sonic 1 got right, refines it, and adds to it, and completely blows it out of the water. As I've said multiple times during this review, this game absolutely nails the high-speed platforming that the series is known for. Every stage, that's not Sky Chase, brilliantly integrates the new level gimmicks into the high-speed platforming without breaking the pace. Each one of these zones have their own identities, with their own set pieces. They have so much flavor, and so much area to explore. It's not just 15 speed boosters in a row. The pure design of this game cannot be understated. It's quite amazing. To put it simply, there was nothing like this game at all when Sonic 2 came out. Sonic 2 was a revolution. The replay value is just incredible. This, guys, is the true start of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Whenever I'm in game limbo and I've exhausted Sonic 3 and Mania, this is my go-to. The legendary status this game holds is undeniable. This game is what made Sonic a true household name. At the end of its life, the game sold over 6 million copies. This is the game that sold a lot of Nintendo people on the Mega Drive. And that said, I think all fans of platformers, and just video games in general, need to play this game at some point. Sonic 2 will forever hold my respect and a special place in my heart as the first classic Sonic game I was fully able to beat by myself. I know thinking a corporation is just stupid and is something you should never do.
My jaw's hitting the ground.
Looking at you, Nintendo fans, but in this case, I feel like I have to. Sega, thank you for making this game. Without it existing, I don't know if I would be where I am today. This game is what cemented Sonic as a franchise, and from here on out, it was pure Sonic Mania.
Like last time, I feel like it's really important to look at the other versions of the game, because they add new additions plus just general improvements. And in the case of Sonic 2, they even restore beta elements. And I think it's very important to look at them. Let's head back to Sonic Jam and the mobile remastered.
Sonic Jam was a game compilation title released for the Sega Saturn back in 1997, and what makes this collection stand out is the fact that the Mega Drive games weren't emulated, they were actually completely rewritten for the Saturn. Each game has bug fixes and general improvements. But what about Sonic 2? What did it introduce? This version of the game doesn't introduce nearly as much to the game as Sonic 1, and that's not for really any other reason other than Sonic 1 feels so different because it was the game that needed the most changes. Sonic 1 had a lot of weird problems, like the spike glitch, no spin dash, etc. So when something like the spin dash is added to Sonic 1, it feels like a completely different game, versus Sonic 2 where a lot of those issues were already addressed. But that's not to say it didn't change some things, because of course it had some bug fixes. It attempts to buff the Aquatic Ruin boss, and it has enhanced sound, which means some of the sound effects are tweaked. It's debatable which is better, but I personally like the original more in some aspects, because I get the sound is technically higher quality on the Saturn, but I don't think it needed to be enhanced in the first place. One of the more noticeable changes is the Sega sound at the start of the game. In the original Genesis, it was at a much higher pitch. Jam fixes that. Pretty neat, I guess. Something that I definitely notice is the fact that the game lags less. In the original, sometimes it can lag. like games typically do, but since it was rewritten for the Saturn, that lag is basically gone, and it feels really smooth. Now I say this is something that most won't even notice, it's just when you play the two back-to-back like I did. The Sega Saturn was a 2D powerhouse, so it makes sense that it can make everything feel smoother. Just as I said last time, this is the best way to play the game. 60 FPS and in 16:9 is just what most players are going to want, and it obviously feels so smooth to play. These aren't ports, they are remade from the ground up. In terms of the little things, I don't have much to talk about. They didn't add the elemental shields like for Sonic 1, which is really confusing to me, but no, there are two major additions to this version that make it truly shine, starting with the special stages. Holy shit! This is the upgrade of the entire century. This, right here, is enough for someone like me, who can be seen as a purist, to never look back at the Genesis version ever again. I mean, it's so smooth! Not only does it run at a buttery smooth 60 FPS, but it receives such a graphical upgrade. No longer is it super pixelated and clunky to play. I always didn't really enjoy playing the special stages in Sonic 2. The only reason I would is for Super Sonic. But now, it makes them way more fun for me. This right here seals the deal. But no, they decided to go above and beyond. They actually added in the originally axed Hidden Palace Zone. Yeah, the beta stage that was everyone's obsession for years. I remember losing my mind when I found this out. And the cool part is, it takes a lot of elements from the original. For example, the badniks are the same, the emerald thing is a breakable object, and the general look is super cool. It feels really natural, like it goes in the game all along. How is it accessed? Remember how I said they changed the pit in Mystic Cave? Yeah, it's here. The pit always felt like something you fell in if you were unlucky, and that spirit lives on in a different way here. Instead of falling to your death, you can discover an entire cool new level. I can imagine so many kids finding this on their own and being mind blown. I know I would have been. But how's the level stack up? I think it's really fun. This is a labyrinth themed zone done right. It actually feels like you're going through a labyrinth. Not to mention, as I said before, it feels like it could have been in the original game. It has a lot of Sonic 2 style in terms of level design. But that's all I really have to say about it. It's only one act, and it takes you to Oil Ocean directly after, so it's basically a bonus. And then there's the boss. Oh, brother, I don't know why it's so bad, but it is. This feels nothing like a Sonic 2 boss. And before anyone says anything, no, it's not because it's more difficult. It's just weird. I had no idea how to beat it originally. You're supposed to let the water rise and let the big spike ball hit Eggman, and that's the only way to damage him. He's normally out of your jumping range? I just don't know. It was really jarring at first. I do appreciate the fact it is a harder boss, but at the same time it felt super out of place. This definitely could have been done better. Now, as for the changes introduced in Sonic Origins, the biggest addition are the game's cutscenes. The fact we actually get to see things like Tails before we meet Sonic, and his peers that bully him, is really cool, but as someone who greatly dislikes the modern interpretation of classic Sonic along with its characters, go and watch my revisit for Sonic 1 if you want to see me going more in depth with that. At times, this can just feel way too cartoony and cutesy for me. I understand they have to make classic Sonic look less cool compared to modern, but this is just too far. Classic used to embody cool, but I'll stop here. The ending cutscene is actually really sick. We get to see the Death Egg fall into Angel Island, which we never got to see. Very cool stuff. The biggest gameplay change here is the addition of the drop dash from Sonic Mania. Man, this feels so good to use in game. It may not have been designed for it, but it's really fun to use here. I think the drop dash should just be a part of Sonic's natural moveset, but I really wish the Insta Shield was here too. I'm not sure why it isn't. It's almost like Sonic Team, or mainly this motherfucker, hates anything to do with Sonic 3. Another really unappreciated change is the fact that Super Sonic has his own button now, which is great. I've always hated how in the original, the moment you jump, Sonic will transform. It's so much better now that you can just save it for a boss, or just whenever you want. This all would make it the definitive version of the game for me, but of course, there has to be a catch. Drumroll please. The coin system. It was added to replace lives, which I greatly dislike. Also, in my revisit to Sonic 1, I talked about the coin system in depth and why I think it's horrid. As bad as it was for me in Sonic 1, it's 10 times worse here. Lives are something that's given to you as a reward for doing great in stages, getting a lot of points, finding them within the stage, or even getting 100 rings. Whenever I would find a secret area, or get a bunch of points and get rewarded with lives, nothing can compare to that feeling. Coins, however, don't do the same. Yes, Functionally, they may seem the same, but I never use them. That's why I have so many. Getting rewarded with, "I suck so hard that I need to use this coin 400 times in the stage," does nothing for me. More so now because this game already has much easier special stages. I wouldn't even mind this if it was limited, like 3 per special stage, but no. Again, if this was an option, I wouldn't even bat an eye, but since I'm forced to play like this, it makes the game way more fun for me. The fact that toggling lives isn't an option is so embarrassing. It should be a basic function. If you enjoy this, that is amazing and I hope you're having a great time, but I just can't. Which is why I stick with classic mode. Now, everyone knows that this isn't actually a classic mode at all. This is just the same port as the remake, just in 4.3. I actually used this to get Supersonic alongside the original game. I just can't do it with the coin system, I'm sorry. But the fact this is even a thing in the first place is just so laughable. Why is this the way it is? Again, was a ROM literally too much work? What an embarrassment. Origins in general just such a failure in every way. This was the perfect opportunity to be the spiritual successor to Sonic Jam, but instead they give us this shit? Honestly, unacceptable. I will be getting Origins Plus in the hopes that it fixes things. Speaking on Origins Plus, as the time I'm editing this video, Origins Plus has not been released yet. We all know that Amy will be playable here, which is really cool, but we don't actually know if any of the big flaws with Origins as a whole will be addressed. And if they are, I will address them in the Sonic CD video.
I really hate to leave this video on a negative note, but that's just how I feel about Sonic Origins. But no matter how I feel about it, it will never change how much Sonic 2 had an impact on me and millions of other people. This game defined an entire generation, and we're still feeling the shockwaves to this day. Even for me, this is the game that made me love the Mega Drive games. It's so beginner friendly and really easy to pick up and play. For me, this game means so much. But if I'm being honest, I'm looking forward to reviewing the next 2 games even more. Mostly Sonic 3. But before we get to Sonic 3, we have to look at the 4th lost installment of the Mega Quadology. Y'all know what it is. Next time on NNC Reviews, we'll be reviewing Sonic the Hedgehog CD for the Sega CD. I'll see you then.